We're in the chapter on flattery. Okay, good. Kuf Samach Tes, if we're up to the 8th. So continuing in our discussion here on flattery, he's giving, I think it was a list of 9 forms of flattery. The most recent one we saw was 7, where he's talking about if a person lives in a place where there are, let's say, wicked or unobservant people, or whose observance is lax, and he says, I'm going to rebuke them because they might not listen. That's wrong, because they might, listen. And if you can rebuke them and you don't, then you're actually held accountable for what they've done wrong. Why? Because you could have prevented them from doing it. So in a way, they're doing it because if you're not saying anything, is considered as if you've done it. And therefore, a person has to be very careful to use his power of influence within his sphere of influence to try and prevent people from doing things wrong. And if he doesn't, that's almost tantamount to concurring with what they're doing. And that's why he includes this in the form of flattery, because, of course, you're not overtly flattering the person, like we were discussing in the previous forms of flattery. But in a way, you're kind of recognizing or giving your tacit, indirect approval to what they're doing. That's a form of flattery, he says. We mentioned that if you can't say anything, you can't do anything, you have no way of helping or changing the situation, then you're not required to actually rebuke the people. And there are certain scenarios where actually we say, mutav shishogagin va'aliyu mezidim, means it would be better for them to do what they're doing wrong by mistake than for you to rebuke them and they're not helping, and then they're going to end up doing it now on purpose because they've been told that it's wrong. Better not to say something that's not going to be heeded than to say it and have them transgress. But there's an important qualification we pointed out there, that's only regarding things that are not well known. But things which are well known, you're required to say even if they won't listen. Like Shabbos observance or kosher, like all of these things are pretty well known, like laws in the Torah. So even if they don't know, you're required to let them know, because they should know, and even if they won't listen. And that at least has the value of pointing out to them that what they're doing is wrong, so they shouldn't feel like our silence is indication that it's really okay, or that's not so bad. Right? That was the point. So let's see now number 8. Hashmini. Hashomea midabre lashon hara or navala. Somebody who hears other people speaking lashon hara or navala, which is dirty talk, not improper, obscene type of language. O yoshev besod mischakim uboze Torah umitzvos, or somebody who is sitting among people who are doing types of jokes and jokesters and things like this. Uboze Torah mitzvos, or people who are belittling, making fun of, jesting about Torah and mitzvos. V'yodea shehem kosher oraf. He knows that these people are very stiff-willed. V'lo yikablu toichacha, and they will not receive this rebuke. Al ken shoysek. As a result of this, he's silent. Gamze ya'anesh. He'll also be held accountable for this. Ki hayay l'la'anososam, because he should have at least put them in their place. Shelo yomru ki hu kemoisam shumoda b'dvreim. The people should end up saying, well, he's one of us, because he's not opposing us, so he must be one of us. So he's strengthening and bolstering their in observance. Ki hu chayav ligor behem, because he has to rebuke them. L'ses gedula l'Torah l'mitzvos, in order to show strength and grandeur to the Torah and the mitzvos. V'lekane l'chavod tzaddik shehir shio, and to show honor for the righteous person or righteous people that these people are coming to besmirch. Because they're ridiculing rabbis and Torah learners and things like that. So it's important, even if you're not going to be able to convince them, at least to stand up for the Torah. Stand up for the people who represent the Torah. V'lekane lichvod atzadik shehirshio, and to be jealous of, meaning to guard the honor of the righteous person that they're trying to speak evilly of. וזה אחד מן הדברים שבעבורם חייב האדם לעזוב חברת הרשעים, and this is one of the matters for which a person is required to depart from evil company, bad society, כי הוא נענש כששומע דבריהם הרעים, because he'll be punished when he hears their evil speech, תמיד, והוא אינו יכול להנוסם תמיד, and he can't always answer them. So be in scenarios where he's hearing people badmouth the Torah, badmouth rabbis, badmouth yeshivas, badmouth observant people, badmouth the mitzvos, and he can't always be arguing with these people, and he might let comments slide, trying to, choose his battles, but ultimately what he's doing is he's kind of, being silent when he really should be defending. And to avoid being in that type of scenario, it's best not to connect with those people at all, not to be in that situation. This matter is very clear in the words of King Solomon in the Proverbs. Don't be jealous of those who do evil, which means don't want to do what they do. I mean, don't envy them, meaning don't, wow, I wish I could be like that, or wow, I wish I could do that. And don't lean yourself towards being like them. Because their hearts ponder destruction, and their lips will speak scorn. The problem with all of this is, if you're sitting by idly, hearing them speak these things, then you yourself become ensnared by not answering. So this can be something which is very common for Bali Tshuva, or people who are becoming more religious, even if they come from religious backgrounds, but not so observant or committed. You might be around friends and family who are making snide comments all the time and stuff like that. Aside from the fact that for a person who's taking his Judaism seriously, it's becoming kind of an affront, and it's embarrassing. It's not comfortable. It's not pleasant to be around people who are kind of chiding and always sneering and taking jibes at what's important to me. But more than that, you're posed with this kind of religious challenge all the time. So it becomes difficult. What are you going to do? Leave your friends? Not spend time with them? That's a very difficult choice and decision to make. Sometimes you have to discern, make a difference between one friend or another, or different types of friends or another, and it's very difficult. But even if you decide, you can afford to spend less time with these friends, what about family? That's already much more difficult. Right? And that hurts a lot more when your family starts making jibes at what you're interested in. And you don't want to disrespect your parents, and you don't want to have a brawl with your brother. It's very uncomfortable. What do you do about this? In the case of friends, when a person starts becoming religious or getting strong in observance of religion, and he finds that his friends are talking about and doing things which are disrespectful to the Torah, he has to say, listen guys, I love you, we're friends, we've been friends for a very long time, but I got to ask you, either collectively or one by one, individually, when I'm around, please have enough respect for me not to be saying all those things. Whatever. And if they say, oh, this is so stupid, and what you're doing is ridiculous, and it would behoove you to listen to what we're saying, maybe we'll talk some sense into you or whatever. So he realizes that they have an agenda to dissuade him, and if he's convinced that what he's doing is right, then he's going to have to say, listen, again, let's be friends, but if it's on those terms, that's not going to work. There's something that is important to me. You might have things that are important to you which I don't particularly appreciate, but I'm not going to get on your case on it, so please stay off mine. But if you can't make up some type of a thing, and your friends are going to ostracize you because you're changing your way of life and your way of thinking, so you have to also rethink whether these are really friends. And if they're really interested in your being part of the group, but for what they get out of your being part of the group and not for what you get out of being in the group, so they're really not friends with you, they're friends to themselves. They want more out of it than what they want is from family. You can't dispose of so easily. They can also make an appeal to your family. Look, What's the point of arguing about this? You have your position, I have mine. I certainly respect your ideas and understand where you're coming from. In fact, I'm the one who's changing, which means I know where you're coming from, but I also know where I want to go. So, why all this conflict and all this tension? And, let's just have a normal relationship. It's not going to help. You're not going to dissuade me by bad-mouthing the rabbis. I've had teachers in this world and have teachers in this world, and I see the difference, and I'm more interested in learning from these types of people than those types of people. That's how I am. I'm an adult. You raised me to be responsible. I'm trying to do the best to use the things that you gave me, and this is the way that I'd like to explore the path in life. So I'm your son, I'm your brother. I love you and always will. But let's concentrate on the things that we share in common and not the things which we don't. It's reasonable, right? But otherwise, even if it's the parents and they're just adamant and taking every opportunity to criticize the person and criticize the rabbis and criticize the Torah and criticize the lifestyle and put you down and make you feel bad and all this stuff. So, a person, unfortunately, in that situation would have to really think how much time he wants to be and can afford spending time with his parents. Still be responsible and make overtures for peace and try to diffuse the situation and everything. But in any case, it would be very problematic to put oneself in a situation where he has to suffer these aspersions silently. I think we're up to the 9th. Is that right? The 9th form of flattery. He honors the wicked in the name of peace. He won't speak well about the wicked. And he's not going to show him honor and respect in a way which would cause people to think that he's really honoring him because he honors his wicked ways. That no. But rather he's just honoring them in terms of like in the way of a formality, like it's customary for people to show honor and respect to wealthy people on account of their wealth. He's not talking about acting in a way of flattery to get something out of those people. That's what he's talking about. He's just talking about acting them in a way which is considered to be a proper formality. So too, you might act civilly with a person, right, in the name of peace. Everybody who sees that would realize that you're not acting civilly and polite because you like this person or that you agree or concur with this person does, but you're just trying to find some, how do they call it? A modus vivendi. It's a way of living with this person. So if for the purpose of peace, you need to kind of have some formal, act in the formality of a peaceful relationship, it's clear you're doing it not because you endear or because you want to emulate these wicked people. You're just trying to find a way of getting by with them. But not to find favor in their eyes. Even this, he says, there is transgression involved. You're not allowed to show respect to the wicked for any reason other than fear. So even if it's just to find a modus vivendi with them, it's also inappropriate. You should rather suffer animosity, competition, hatred from these people, and not try and find some way of making peace with them. Because again, it's like making peace with the evil things that they do. Even if it's the name of peace. You shouldn't do it. Only says if you fear that they'll harm you, then you can show them respect, but only a type of formality, type of respect, where you're only doing it for the purpose of avoiding harm. For example, if he's afraid that the wicked person will harm him, hefsed basman, or he's going to cause him to lose time because the hand of this wicked is heavy. You're allowed to, therefore, show respect to them like you can to the people who are henchmen. Yes, to avoid them harming you. But you shouldn't praise him. You can act in a respectful way. Speak to him in a respectful way, but not praise him or speak about him in a good way to other people. That no. We're talking about a case where you fear. And so the sage of blessed memory said, it is permitted to show flattery to the wicked in this world. After all of this, he tells us it's permitted to act in a way of flattery. What he's saying is that statement applies specifically when you're afraid they're going to harm you. If they're afraid they're going to harm you, you can kind of chummy up with them to avoid being harmed. Still, there are those who are wicked, who even you're not allowed to chummy up and flatter. Minai, how do we know this? Mi Mordechai. The example of this is Mordechai. They said to him, Tachnif l'Haman. What are you being so self-righteous about? Show Haman some respect, and don't make a big deal. Don't make a big issue of it. Mordechai replied to them and said, Don't make any overtures for peace or for good, for their peace or for their good. And they said to him, you can flatter these people for the purpose of peace. Nevertheless, he did not want to chummy up with him because of his particular unique, I guess, viral form of hatred towards the Jews. I'm seeing a little bit of a contradiction here, because he said earlier you're not supposed to show flattery for the purpose of peace. And they said to him, hey, for the purposes of peace, show flattery. And it said, Mordechai did not want to show this type of Russia any overture for peace, implying that another type of Russia, it would be permitted to flatter for peace, but we're just told that you shouldn't.
What's the difference between Haman and other types of Russia?
So I thought he was going to say, the case of Haman, he was making an idol out of himself, and he wanted people to bow down to him as if he was a god.
Right. And
I was thinking maybe that's why it was so different.
So that's like pushing it a little
bit. Yeah. So I would have thought that your generic Russia, you can't really flatter or chummy up with in any way, even for the purposes of, only if it's a purely technical type of formality in order to preserve the peace. From what he said earlier, I would think that you can't do that. You would only be able to do it if there's some suspicion of harm involved. And here he's saying that some Rishonim are so wicked that you can't make any overtures to peace in any scenario. And he's going back to the idea of peace. He said earlier, you shouldn't do it for the purposes of peace.
A lot of irony involved in the story of Purim.
Is that a pun?
No, it is.
Like Ironic?
No, that's not what I meant.
I thought you were. Yeah, like what? Yeah, what do you mean for example?
This.
Yeah.
Also the fact that the God isn't even mentioned once in the whole story. And
nevertheless, you see God is, pulling the strings every step of the way.
Right.
Huh. Okay, let's see. Having gone through the 9 forms of flattery which are forbidden, going from the more stringent to the less stringent, which is what we ended up with, are the scenarios where flattery is permitted, where flattery might be a miswa. So that's the subject of the next chapter, next paragraph. At the bottom of Kuf Ayin. V'yachnif Adam li'ishto. He should flatter his wife. And we're not talking about complimenting. There's nothing problematic about complimenting. Right? The problem is flattering. When he says flatter his wife, which means going beyond what's even correct or accurate, in order just to chummy up with her, make her feel good. Yeah, you should do that. Why? Mishum Shalom Bais. Mishum Shalom Bais. I was reading through the Zohar a bit today, and I saw there a discussion about how mankind was not created because God had not yet brought rain upon the earth, and then God brought rain upon the earth, ve'ed ya'aleh min haaretz, and moisture came rising from the earth. So the Zohar says that the man is compared to the heaven, being on top, initiating the rain, and when that rain falls and is absorbed by the earth, which is the female then gives forth vapor from below. And so there's a relationship between God's initiating of the rain and the earth giving forth its moisture, its abundance, relationship between that and creating mankind with a male and female aspect and then separating to them into man and woman. But one of the things I saw from that teaching in the Zohar is that it's really the man's responsibility to take the initiative to rain attention and affection and flattery upon his wife. He shouldn't be expecting to get compliments from her. He should be initiating and giving her the compliments, giving her, like I said, watering her in emotional sense. And when he does that, to the extent that she becomes soaked, as it were, with these attention, warmth, and love and compliments, the result will be, Ed ya'aleh min haaretz, then vapor rises up from the earth. She'll reciprocate. She'll give forth back what you get. But you have to irrigate. You have to pour the attention onto her. And when you do it properly, she becomes absorbed with all of that. Then the result will be that she'll start emitting it. That's certainly true in the emotional, the spiritual sense. It's true in the emotional sense, and I understand it to be true even in the physical sense. That the man is initiating the flow from above, and when he stimulates her from a position of pleasing her from above, the result is that she'll also be she'll also be interested from below. And that means that you see on a spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and physical level, all of this is born, pun intended, is born out. And that's exactly the way it's supposed to be. If a man knows how to treat the woman properly by giving to her first, then she'll respond appropriately. Right? And ultimately, her response is going to be better for him also. Right? But if he doesn't really give, he just takes, he doesn't properly water the earth, so she's not going to be able to properly receive him, and she won't therefore be in a position to really give from the fruits of the earth either. I know I'm speaking very reproductive type of analogy, but that's the point. That's the point. It's true on all different levels, spiritually, intellectually, and you see it's borne out physically as well.
What was the analogy? Man is rain, woman is.
The man is from the heavens, and the female is the earth. The man has to pour his water from on high in order to saturate the earth. And when the earth becomes saturated from the liquid with which he pours upon it, so then the earth itself returns that vapor back upward towards the male. Right?
Zohar?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's very it's very important principle on all of those levels. And we know it's certainly true on the physical level, and therefore, from the Jewish point of view, a man's sexuality is properly expressed not by conquering a woman. He's really forcing himself upon her, and that's not going to be good for her, and it's ultimately not going to be good for him either. But if he has the strength, the fortitude, the self-control to guard himself while giving pleasure to her, So ultimately, it's going to initiate a relationship where, right, when she's ready to receive, she'll receive properly. And when he's able to give properly and she's able to receive properly, he's actually, right, receiving reciprocally even more. And that's the idea, I think, one of the ideas in the Zohar here, is the rain coming from high, initiating the vapor from coming below, and that leads to the earth emitting its fruit in a proper way. And Jewish teachings do say that when a woman reaches her pleasure first, which requires from the man a great degree of self-control, because he's more likely to experience that first, but he was able to control that for the purpose of letting her experience and receive first, a child that's born of such a union is more likely to be a male child. Why? Because in Judaism, that's acting like a man. Acting like a man is controlling himself, not imposing himself. Right? Very often, from the mentality of the world that we come from, being manly is really expressed by imposing himself on her. It really doesn't matter where she, or it really doesn't matter much about her at all. It's imposing himself on her. Judaism, no. It's controlling himself for her. That's acting like a man. Not conquering, but controlling. Not conquering her, conquering himself. So he's in a state of self-control. Now that he's holding within himself this masculine energy by conquering himself and controlling himself, when that energy is released, it's enveloped with a masculine form of energy, and the result is going to be that the child is more likely to be a male child. So it's very important then for a man to initiate this with his wife. Flatter her, right? Inundate her with compliments and with gifts and with kisses and with things that are going to make, her feel loved and cherished and valued and desired. That will bring shalom bayis. Also, he says, you can kind of, this is interesting, flatter the person that you owe money to. I don't know what that's all about. It says, Shalo yilchatzeno, so he shouldn't pressure you. That's interesting. You can flatter him to keep him off your back, maintain the loan. Rabbo, also to your rabbi, Shilandenu Torah, for the purpose of his learning Torah. The truth is, what we were saying before is not limited to the man's initiating. Right? A woman who feels the desire for closeness with her husband is encouraged to let him know. And then that can catalyze the process that we were talking about before. Same thing applies here, the relationship between like a rabbi and a student. A student who kind of doesn't really show any interest, so the rabbi might share with him, but a student who's asking questions is making himself available, and he's kind of basically like spiritually winking at his rabbi in order to, attract the rabbi's attention. He's ultimately going to initiate a scenario of what we were talking about before, the rain and the earth, right? The giver and the recipient, for the purpose of the productivity which results. Same thing applies, spiritually speaking, between husband and wife, and also between a rabbi and a student. The student who kind of makes himself like a woman by asking questions and showing an interest in this rabbi's Torah is initiating, kind of, it's like seeding the clouds so that they rain. And the rain is going to be received, right, by the student. It's going to gestate that water, that Torah that's rained down upon him, and ultimately grow as a result of it. Right? And he himself then can become in a position where he's now able to rain, right, on others. So it's the same thing here. He's saying a person can flatter one's rabbi in order to draw that rain, that water, that Torah towards him. Shilndenu Torah. It's also quite good to flatter his students and his friends. This is now going back to the original discussion, like I said, like a husband initiating the flattery towards the wife, the same thing to the rabbi, to the student. For example, I was in a situation once where there was a certain student who was in my class, and he enjoyed the class, I suppose, to a certain extent, but for whatever reason he moved to what's considered to be a higher level of the class. And either he wanted to, or he's encouraged to, or maybe there was some social pressure to do so, even though he might not have been ready to. It doesn't matter. He was in another class for a certain period of time, and he wasn't functioning properly there. So the rabbi said, I don't know what's going on with this guy. He moved up, but he's not focusing, he's not paying attention, he's not catching on. But, so I think it's a good idea for him to go back to your class, And it almost seemed like the rabbi was saying, like, this is not kind of, material of much promise, so let him stay. But, the guy came into the class without even realizing it. Within like a minute or two, I heaped a very nice compliment on the guy. And not really intentionally, but it was just a natural reaction to something that he said, and I wanted to encourage him. And before you know it, he's like listening, and he's paying attention, and he asks a question, and excellent, very good question, and I haven't ever thought about it that way, and before you know it, he becomes an active member of the class. Right? So you see here the value as well is, complimenting a person, making him feel good about himself, making him feel that he's contributing is a very good way of initiating this productivity. So if that's what a person has in mind, he's allowed to flatter in that scenario as well. It should be honest though. Like anything, the truth is the best. But there's no reason why you can't find something good to say about a person. And the rabbi should do so for the students. But the rabbi is constantly saying, no, that's stupid. There's no sense to what you're saying. Think about it. How can you have said such a thing? How many times can a person hear that before he closes up, shrivels up, and just loses? Some people might respond to that. Some people might have strong enough to withhold that onslaught and take it as a challenge and understand the rabbi doesn't really mean it. It's just his way of encouraging and not to discourage. But most people won't be able to withstand that. It's kind of like the analogy they talk about the wind and the sun on a competition. Who's stronger? The sun says, I'm stronger. The wind says, I'm stronger. So they see a person walking down the street with a coat on, and they say, let's make a contest, see who's stronger. So the sun says, okay, you go first. See if you can blow the guy's coat off. And the more he blows on the guy, the more he takes his coat and he huddles into it, tighter and tighter and tighter, until the wind loses steam and says, I'm puckered out. It's your turn. So the sun comes. Smiles on the guy. And before you know it, it's getting hot here. He opens on buttons and is joking. So the sun smiles. So he takes it off and he puts it on his shoulders, One more time. So the guy, before you know it, he takes his coat off. Right? So the sun won the competition. So it's an important lesson. You go blowing on a person and blowing. You're just going to cause him to become further entrenched. But if you're warm and loving and kind, you're much more likely to have a good positive impact on the person. The same thing with your wife, and with your children, and with your friends, and with your students. You go blowing on everybody all the time. Yeah? What are you doing that for? Stop doing that! Yeah?
That's a great analogy.
Yeah?
It's great.
But you're such a wonderful kid. You give me such nachas all of the time, and to see you speak to your brother that way, it's unfortunate because it's not becoming of a kid who's such a tzaddik like you. Love each other, peace, love, and happiness. So there's a much better way. We go blustering into everybody all the time. You're going to just blow them out of your life. That's not going to work. So let's try and finish off this little section. We have to go. So therefore, he says, these are different scenarios where it behooves one to actually show flattery. So that they will actually listen to his words. You're not rebuking somebody, right? You're shouting. You shout so loud the person can't hear you. They don't hear you because you're shouting. They can't hear you. Speak quietly, calmly. They'll understand you. They'll receive the words of rebuke in order to fulfill the mitzvahs. And any person who is trying to draw him to himself, in order to encourage him to fulfill the mitzvahs. If he comes to him with an angry countenance, he won't hear him. But through endearing him, he will hear his words of rebuke. It's a big mitzvah to flatter people in this scenario because you're actually redeeming sparks of holiness within the realm in which they're being imprisoned. There are people, and this is most people, they won't accept rebuke through strong language. But with calmness, with love, Shneimar, it says, the words of the wise are heard calmly, and the wise speak calmly, so that their words are heard. There are instances where a person does need strong speech. Shneimar, it says, for a wicked person, yes, strong speech is needed to cause him to understand. V'yesh malkos, and there is a punishment of the lashes, like it says. Sometimes you have to stripe a person. But there are those who even striping, whipping, won't help. Shneimar, it says, Mahakois ksil me'ar. Mahakois ksil me'ar. A proper word spoken to a wise man is worth more than 100 lashes to the wicked, because this fool won't respond to even lashes. Imken manaselo ein lo takana ella tigarashehu. Such a person who you can't speak to him in wisdom, you can't punish him either. He just doesn't listen. What do you do with such a person? You're forced to let him go. Forced to let him go. Okay, let's stop here and let you guys go.